Hopefully it will make no more noises on my computer. Yes.
There you go. That's good.
We could do that on Thanksgiving since we're not going to have a podcast that day.
That's true. Yes, we'll be off duty on that day.
Yeah.
That's 2 weeks from now, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Get my head screwed on straight. Yeah. Okay.
So this is GoingSoloMedia.com, WGSN Internet Radio for singles, TV, #1 TV and podcasts. And this is Let's Talk About Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine. Let's have a fun conversation today.
I think so. I mean, last week was so fun. Last week we talked about the reasons that you're scared to get into dating, in online dating and any way of dating. There were lots of reasons we came up with and lots of solutions to help people over the hump to just get out and start dating. Right. So now this week we're going to talk about if you're scared of getting into a relationship. So now you're out there bravely dating. First you put your toe in the water with dating, and now you're going to put your whole foot in. I know. Because, I've been thinking about that a lot this week since this was going to be our subject, really for 2 weeks, because we talked about it 2 weeks ago, this tag of two subjects. Right. And I think people often get concerned about dating just because they're so worried about their heart. And really, I mean, it's not very accurate to worry about your heart when you're dating if you've learned how to go slowly and not take it personally, and you need to get to know them for a while before you give them access to your heart. So, okay, you could be very worried about your heart when you're getting in a relationship, because if you're getting in a relationship, it's because you want to get to know their heart and you want them to get to know your heart. So there's some really valid as well as made up things that people get worried and scared about with relationships. So I'm very excited to talk about that today.
Yeah, definitely something to talk about, because it is another level, because dating for some people is very surface. So although we didn't talk about it last week that way, but it's like some people just go on dates just to pass the time, to meet new people and have fun. So it's a very low investment level.
Yeah.
But a relationship for most people, because some people will still treat relationships that flippantly. For most people, the relationship is the next step into another level. Although it's interesting because some people call relationships dating. Like they said, I want dating somebody. It's like, well, no, that's a relationship. Dating is somebody that you're just going out for a couple of dates. But some people have it viewed a different way. So in our vernacular, let's make sure we get people with clarity, is that in our context, dating is you go out with somebody on the first date, second date, third date. A relationship is when you go beyond that to a consistency of being with somebody and you're loyal. Well, ideally, you're monogamous, because you may prefer that versus polyamorous.
Yeah.
But it's about you want to connect to this one person, go deeper and deeper and deeper, which is a much greater risk for some people. So we're going to talk about what that feels like and where the fear comes from, why you may be scared of going from the dating scene to a relationship that is deeper and more committed.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the word you used, I'm going to say that partly what we worry about is being seen. It's having somebody see into us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really just popped in my head when you said that. I thought, oh yeah, because with that whole surface part, we put our best foot forward, as we should, and to have more surfacey kind of conversations, which is appropriate. And if you really want to get in a relationship with somebody, you're going to have to show, the parts of you that maybe you don't think are quite as lovely or as polished. And right. It's part of just getting to know somebody and letting them get to know you. And oh my gosh, I did surface for such a long time because I was very nervous about that in my first time of being single. I said, I think I don't want them to get to know all the parts of me because I don't want to give them a chance to disapprove of me. That was one of my really big things.
Our approval need is so strong in people for many reasons. It's true. And another piece of that, it's almost like it's funny because we're now wearing masks because of the pandemic, but people will a lot of times wear masks on dates that have the appearance like, let me put my face on straight so I can be presentable in this mask that I'm wearing. Not a mask protector. It's just like you're full, your face is fixed a certain way because the way you look good when you're on a date. It's that sexy aloof look and whatever it is you present. But when you're in a relationship, that mask can't stay up. It's got to come down. Although some people try vainly to hold on to it for month after month after month, but it's like getting a little bit stilted and cracked and not working. And they finally reveal themselves. And oftentimes they get surprised when the partner goes, "Oh, thank you. Now I can see you finally." What a gift that can be.
Yes. And it could be, I didn't know that about you. And I think that could be a problem for me. You know, like something that women have done is, oh, I love fishing, because they love fishing. I love fishing. And then it turns out they really don't like fishing, and they go fishing and they crab the whole time and they put it off all the time. And I mean, that's such a benign thing, but if it's really important to him, or for the woman, I love theater, and he says, oh yeah, I love theater. And it turns out, you know, he's going to fall asleep 5 minutes after he's there because he doesn't like it. And what's sad is we think that makes us a bad person. It doesn't at all. It's when you say, oh, this is really who I am, which is part of being in a relationship, is acknowledging to yourself and then to the other person. So I tell people about fishing, I'm fine going. I prefer not on a boat because I get seasick. I'm happy to sit there because I take a book and I read. It's such a nice time for me to sit and read, and I'll cheer when you catch a fish, but the actual act of fishing doesn't bring me pleasure. I can do it. I'll even bait my own hook, but it doesn't bring me pleasure like it does them. But I'm very pleased to be with them. But I don't make bones about that. I love the casting and the reeling and it's. and I see why people like it, but it's not me.
Right, but there's a key in there. What you want to do a sidebar first. First of all, the sidebar is that it's so much easier when you are honest in your dating profile. So when people go out with you, don't put in their false information that you're going to have to then stand up to, like afterwards and go, oh, I didn't really mean what I said. I shouldn't have said that. Just be honest in your profile. Make it easy from the get-go. I have a big thing about being honest in your pictures and the words on your profile. Anyway, the other part is when you're in a relationship, one of those things is that there may be a hobby that your partner loves dearly that you're not passionate about doing with them. But to witness them doing it, which is different, can be a real fun thing to do. And if they want you just to be around them, and it's great, you get to drive together to the venue, you hang out, maybe it's a place where they go horse riding, for example. I know it's one you love. But if your partner doesn't love horse riding, but doesn't mind being, watching you horse ride or hanging out at the stables, or just simply sitting in the car and reading while you're doing it, it's like, what is the degree of association that can work where you're not doing exactly the same thing, but you're embracing the hobby of the other person to let them at least enjoy themselves, and you don't hold them back. So it's finding that medium where it works for you both. Because some people, it might be like, if I love, you love horse riding, your partner has to go horse riding with you, otherwise it doesn't feel the same if they're somewhere else. But they may not be comfortable with that. So it's like you need to know what that is. So it's good to have those conversations fairly well early in the relationship too, because then you know what's going to work, what's not going to work, just to be clear.
So important. And the other part I worried about when I would think, oh, they won't like me, is I can't say that. What would they think of me if I said, fill in the blank? And it's funny how there's benign things and there's bigger things. And right now, the three big things, I cannot have a conversation right now, a coaching conversation, without one of the three subjects of politics, COVID shot, pot. And I cannot go out with somebody that disagrees with whatever it is. I'm like, really? Wow. It's very adamant. So part of thinking that I would not want to be in a relationship is if I thought, I can't talk about that. I can't talk about something that's really important to me or that I have a big interest in, that if we're so adamant about our different views that we can't even have a conversation, that it would make that if I used to, it's so hard for me to say it now because I used to be nervous about saying it. What would they think? Now it's like, oh, that would be disappointing. But I have to say. And so one was saying, so do I say in my profile, if you voted for Trump or if you voted for Biden, I can't even talk to you? I said, no. Nowadays, what I've suggested is you say who you vote. I voted for Trump or I voted for Biden. This is my preference of having somebody that has a similar view. So, because I really hesitate to put hardly anything that you don't want in your profile, that you just turn it around to something you do want.
Yes.
But oh my gosh, the rancor about those 3 subjects right now, that if it's not my way, then I can't even be with you. Really?
Right.
That's hard.
Well, it's interesting because the first 2, yes, I totally get and have a lot of conversations with this with clients and friends, which is about politics and about, the COVID period, just the whole thing.
Yeah.
The other part, though, the pot one hasn't come up, which is interesting. Why I was going, because the pot one hasn't been part of the
really?
conversation. It hasn't. I'm trying to think. It's not happened on my own dates. It hasn't happened in my client calls, and it hasn't happened with friends. No, actually, it hasn't been right. For me, it's just not a different audience. Is what it is.
Yeah, I guess.
It's interesting, though, in that context. And yes, I agree with you about framing your dating profile in the positive versus the negative. So, because I definitely, as I'm single, I'm on the dating apps and I'm looking at profiles. And the women that say, don't reach out to me if you're a Trumper. It's like, well, what if I want to reach out if I'm something else instead? Because the thing is that, because the other part also, just to micromanage this for a minute, because there are people who support Trump and there are people, Republicans, who want the same thing.
Yeah.
Then it becomes like, is it political or is it just ego? Is it an ideologue type thing? It's like, there's a rationale there. So putting in what you do want, where you're more specific, is an important thing to say. It's like, I want to be with somebody who has liberal social views to the way society works, is a positive way of spinning it, for example. Or if you want to say that I'm with somebody who's very conservative in their values and their financial stuff, it's like, okay, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that is so, and it is interesting because we are living through divisive times, certainly, to make it interesting. So being scared being in a relationship, it requires a lot more of the entry at the gate before you get into a relationship. They need to put up there now than it used to be. It used to be much easier. It's just like 3 or 4 things and you'd be clear. It's like, okay, monogamy, drinking, and
married or not.
Yeah, that's what
want to get married or not. Yeah.
Right. But now it's
Kids
like that.
or not.
Right. There's this plus vaccine stance and politics. So, but through this, though, it's still in the same bucket, which is like at the door before you walk into the room of relationship. You're going, okay, before we enter the room, just to be clear, what are your value systems are, so we can be on the same page.
Yes. And with that, where hopefully you have some gray areas. Yes, we all have to have our absolute black and white. This is where I am. And I can't tell you how many people don't have gray areas in a whole bunch of things. But this is going to be really hard for you to have a long relationship with somebody if you have all these deal breakers. I mean, really.
Yeah.
It's like when I have them do those lists about what you can't have and what you can't have, their list of what they can't have is astronomical. And we really have to do a lot of internal work with that, because there's reasons that are usually protection, which is keeping them safe and not in a relationship. So there's another way that if you have too many deal breakers, the whole too picky thing was funny. When people started saying they were too picky, I thought they weren't being picky enough. There was a big phase of time when people were being picky enough. They were being picky about the weirdest stuff and not the really core stuff. And now I really will say, yep, you're being too rigid. You're being too picky. Let's figure out where you just might. I don't want to change your mind. Are there any gray areas? Since you are a liberal, would you be with a moderate? Oh, a moderate. I hadn't thought about that. I go, They don't have to be super right. They're somewhere in the middle. They look at both sides. They have conversation. Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So that way I can help people bring in more of the gray area, more of the place for some negotiation, and then how to have that conversation, how to be brave to say, this is my preference for me, what I believe. And then this is sort of the kind of people I hang out with. And where do you stand with all that? Right. So I think that's really helpful to have people feel more brave about getting in a relationship if they know the kind of conversations to have. That's exactly what you and I teach.
Right. And to add to that, there's the old adage about opposites attract. Well, in the area of politics and vaccines, that doesn't work too well. So it's almost like you already want to find someone who's matching values to you, because it's going to be much more joyful and more relaxed, because you won't be stressing over, can I say the right thing? Did I say the wrong thing? What are they going to think of me when I say this? That sort of stuff, which is such a challenge. And so having that list, same thing as you do, is like the list of what's really vital. What, like, it's almost, in some ways, is you make a list of everything you want to have in a relationship. Then you grade it from 1 through 10, what the priority of those things are.
Yes.
Because if they're not 8 or above, probably can be like flexible on those things. So is understanding that, because that's the gray area piece, is really, if the values below is like 7 or below, or 7 to maybe 4, that's in the gray area.
Yeah.
You know, when it's below 3, then it's definitely in agreement. I mean, it's definitely in sorry, wrong around. 10,
it's not as big a deal. Yeah.
Right. But if they go 10, it's a big deal. So like learning what the value of each one's is, because we all say, well, the list is going to be 17 things. Like, great. What's the most important one on that list? What's the most important 5 on that list? Most people don't know. So it's important to get clear what your priorities are in a sequence, so that way you know that they check off the certain things, and the other ones that are below that are like, oh, okay, I can live with those.
Yes.
So the idea about, you know, being left or being center is okay, but you didn't voice that. So it's important to get clear about what it is you really want. So it makes a relationship less scary, because you want to find someone that does, in fact, fill you with joy and love, ideally, versus stress and doubt.
Oh, it's so important. I mean, I've said it before on this podcast that it was the thing that was so loudly ringing in my head after my very first lunch with my late husband about, I am so comfortable talking to him. I feel like I could say anything about who I am and what I'm looking for. It was such an amazing thing to happen. And it was like that for the entire time we were together. That it wasn't that we always agreed, for sure. We did agree on mostly core things, but you know, as all married people, you have disagreements. And knowing that we both had a safe spot that we could say to the other person whatever was really on our mind was magical. It really was. And so I give myself lots of credit that I worked really hard to get to that place where I knew how I felt and the things that were important to me, and then had practiced getting braver saying it around people before I met him, that then it was like second nature to me, because it feels so weird when I teach people to do this, to ask so what I say to them is ask an I'm curious question where it doesn't feel like interrogating and interviewing. So I would say, you know, this is my feeling about this, and I'm curious what yours are. I'm curious what your experience has been. So it doesn't feel so hot lights, thumb screws, better answer the right thing. I'm taking notes. It does feel that way. So many guys feel that way.
Yeah.
That it's something that will help you feel more like it doesn't feel so risky. It doesn't feel so scary. And that if you've done this to get there, then once you're in where you're talking about, I want to be exclusive, I want to get to know you better, I want to think about something in the future, you've got enough of a foundation where you're like, well, we could talk about everything, you know, even when we disagree. Because I think that people think that that's what's going to happen, is that everything's just going to be a big fight. And who wants to get in a relationship if you're going to fight all the time?
It's true. But I want to back it up for a second to the beginning again, because some of the reasons people are scared of getting into a relationship is because, first of all, they're going to be afraid of giving up their freedom, which is a big one, because they will their alone time, ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want, that sort of thing. The second piece we talked about, which is the fear of taking down the mask and being seen, exposed, vulnerable. Yeah. And yet, like, I was thinking when you said that earlier about like the challenges, like we've shown them the front side of the moon, they get shown the dark side of the moon at the same time. So that piece of stuff, it's kind of visual for me. It's like both, you know, the light and the dark. But the other piece also is this, and I think it's true for men, not just me, is that the fear when and it may be true for women too, I don't presume with this, but the feeling is that when we get into a relationship, there's a fear of closing the door on other people. Like what's possible. It's like, I'm with this person. Does that mean now I'm going to miss out on that mystery person out there I haven't met yet, or this other person I used to be with, or this other things? So there's a lot of stuff that comes up in ourselves that oftentimes we don't own or voice or even recognize. There's nothing to do with that person we're with. It's all inside of us. So this fear of being in a relationship for a lot of people, I know with my clients a lot of times, because, and also add another piece of the puzzle, is in their past relationship, there's so much wounding that they're worried they're going to have the same wounding in the next relationship. So a lot of my clients is healing those wounds, so that way they can look forward to the next relationship without the fear of repeating the same cycle again, the same wounding, the same pain, the same suffering again. So these are all key components.
Yes. And along with that, I would say I hear a lot from women, especially. I don't hear this from men. I'm going to lose myself. I lost myself. I lost who I was, my essence. I was always exhausted. I was always overwhelmed. And I don't feel that way now. Even though I now have to do everything myself, I lost who I was, and I don't want to do that again. And they think automatically, if that's what happened before, and yes, unless they learn something different from us, they probably will do that again. They will lose themselves again. So that's a very valid concern.
Yeah. And that's the thing is often, and it's funny because people do it the other way around, which is that I'm going to get somebody new to do exactly the opposite of what I did last time. Even though it won't be what happens. They have that feeling that's like, okay, I screwed up before, so I'm going to do something totally different the next time. And then 3 months in, they're going, damn, I'm doing the same thing I was doing last time.
Yeah.
Because that's the challenge about this stuff is if you don't change your paradigm or change your wiring and you keep repeating the same pattern in the next relationship, independent of who the other person is. So part of that fear of being in a relationship can often be the fear of repeating the same patterns. Yeah. So when you do intercede between your past relationship and the next one with somebody who knows how to help you, like us, then you'll be in a much better place to approach the relationship from a much more whole place and less fear comes up. So it's important to do the work in between relationships, for sure.
And so much of it comes back to who are we and what's important to me and what have I didn't know in the past or denied in the past. So another thing, being a widow and working with widows, a very real, honest concern is they might die again.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a very understandable fear for everybody. Mm-hmm. Whether you've lost a spouse or not, anybody could be worried about it. That what if we're in the age group where the odds are good that he's probably going to die before we are, because you just do. Even though you live longer when you're in a relationship, you still do seem to die before we do. It's so sucky. It's so weird, right? Because they've done studies. Yeah, they've done studies that you guys just are happier and live longer and healthier when you're in a committed relationship, married or not. You just like it. You do better. It works for you.
Right.
And yet something just gives out and you die, sadly. So to get over that is to say, and I had this client so adorable in her 80s who'd been widowed twice before from long marriages.
Wow.
And is now happily married a third time.
Wow.
He's a little bit younger this time. And we talked in the beginning. I said, gosh, I so admire you want to do this. And yeah, dating is so different after the 25 years since your last marriage. And tell me honestly. And she goes, I have all this love to give. And I love being married. I love getting I know. This is like, look, can I just clone you? I want to just pass this on to everybody.
Yeah.
And so she's so happily married again. And, they talked about, they, have all the plans in place in case one of them dies because they're both in their 80s. And she couldn't imagine not. Right. Where people are like, but I can't imagine, it would be too scary. But it's like, if I am very clear that animals dying is not the same as a spouse dying because I'm a widow and I've had pets die too. And I do equate it to say, yes, your heart breaks when your pet dies, and we outlive our pets constantly because they just don't live that long. And what are the reasons not to get one? Maybe now you have freedom. So there's a thing to, as you just said, that you like having your freedom. And
right.
But I like the companionship of my pets. I like having them around the house. And for the time I have them, it's wonderful. And it is sad when they're gone. And still, I wouldn't want to give it up. And then there's that famous line that I've now used since my marriage was only for 5 years from Steel Magnolias, where the Julia Roberts character says, I'd much rather have 18 months of wonderful than 35 years of mediocre. So if you can do what we're saying and get yourself into a relationship that's loving and caring and makes you feel whole, and you're giving to the other person as much as you're getting back, why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you, even though there's all this potential to have downsides?
Well, that's the thing is and speaking to that point of being widowed and when somebody dies, you can spend 10 years in fear that the person you would get together with might die, or you say, look at the wonderful 10 years we're having. And yes, at the end, they might not saying 10 years and it's over type thing, but just that parallel path that people have of just living in fear and never experiencing anything in relationship because they're afraid that the partner might die before them, versus diving into a relationship. And yes, maybe their partner does die before them after 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
So you're going to begrudge the 25, 30 years of happiness you can have with that person because you're worried about the day they're going to disappear on you?
Yeah.
But people do that, though. They run that fear cycle through with that. And what seems to happen is people go up in the paradigm of what's wrong, what's not going to work, what's going to be holding them back versus what they're going to gain from it.
Oh, so true. And I also had a male client who explained to me, so eloquent, I just get the smartest people that I get to coach. Even though they go, I don't know how to date, I go, but you're so smart about other things. I'm smart about dating. I'll teach you that part. He said, I worried because it was a second marriage, and I worried that I would leave her dying, and how would it be for her? And then I worried about her dying. He said, and I look back now after she died about the times that it feels like I wasted worrying about it, partly because we think worrying is going to prepare us.
Nope.
I am here to tell you, I have not talked to one widowed person, including me, who my husband had a heart condition. He talked about he lived past his expiration date. We knew someday he would die.
Right.
You still can't be prepared for them being officially gone. They're officially gone. You can't have that conversation about I'm worried anymore. So to limit the worry is so helpful. So that's part of talking about when you're scared, what's appropriate to worry about? Because that's not worrying about them dying or leaving you. In fact, I think it can make your health worse. If you're worried about them leaving, you might not be as loving and as caring and as nurturing to your relationship. So then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. How sad is that?
Right. How much you want to hold back away from them because you're afraid of them leaving is like,
yes.
Why would you embrace that? Then you're mediocre. Why not all in, enjoy every single moment you have until there's no longer that moment? And if it goes 55 years, great. If it goes 5 years, great.
Yeah.
It's the biggest thing. I mean, because with my dad passing away after my mum passed, because today would be my mum's birthday. And so I was like celebrating her birthday and saying this year my dad's back with her because they both passed away now. And, the fact he outlasted her by 9 years, there was something in it because he actually thought he was going to go first. He actually was selfish enough to think that she would outlast him so he wouldn't have to deal with all the stuff he had to deal with. That was the first 8 months after she passed. So that wasn't pretty.
No.
So I would suggest to anybody out there, because of that experience, that is going through this fear about, well, what if they outlast them, whatever, especially if someone's over a certain age where they start to think about the finality of that experience, is focus on what you get, not what you don't.
Yeah.
Focus on what you have and what you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that what you have, you get to keep always. Yes. Even after they pass away, you get to keep that inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
Versus all that fear that you still get to keep inside of you, which sucks.
Yeah. Sucks.
Right.
And so the fears are real, normal, understandable. And what I like to talk about too is how do we keep them to a minimum?
Mm-hmm.
How do we say thank you? Okay, maybe that'll help me appreciate it even more, that I'm like, wow, they could be gone. What more good could I bring to this relationship? What more could I do to enhance our loving feelings for each other? How do we do that switch so that the fear doesn't keep taking over and limiting us to finding a loving, caring relationship? Because it'll prevent us from getting in a relationship, sadly.
Well, this is the point, is the fear. I mean, they talk about fear of being the was it false expectations appearing real, or forget everything and run, or whatever those statements are. But that that fear, being scared of being in a relationship, the things that are scaring us aren't real because they haven't happened yet.
Yeah, it's true.
But I said earlier, you might be running past memories and past experiences that you're going to apply to the future, but that's an illusion too, because you're not in the future yet. This person you're meeting now isn't necessarily going to be the same as one that happened before. They might if you hadn't done the work, but if you have done the work, it's likely to be different. So it's time to really shed those fears, those doubts and worries, and step into possibility.
Yeah.
Have some fun with what you want to create.
I find that the fear is like building your relationship on sand. That when you have built a foundation of, well, we can handle anything that comes up, and we're going to just keep talking about the things that are important to us and the value that we keep placing on our relationship, that's like building it on cement with pilings that go down into the ground. So there's just nothing that will shake it. So if you do that, then every time a fear comes up, you're like, well, we have it handled. We can do that together. We'll be able to be fine. We'll work this out. We've laid a foundation for all those possibilities that could come up. Because if you spend a lot of time on the fear, that's not fixing it.
No.
So I appreciate the fear to bring up to the front of our brain. Oh, well, what should I do about this? What can I think about? What action can I take? What can we do together? Because I think the fear pulls us apart, where to figure out a way to be more cohesive as a couple working on your relationship together is the switch that you and I really like talking about.
Well, the thing is, we can be focused on how do we have the fear. We focus on how do we not have the fear in a way. It's like we can basically choose that point about what we're going to focus on. Focus on more fear. Focus on building things that reduce the fear. And the thing about the strong foundations, the concrete foundations. This is the thing. Don't wait for the relationship to do that. Do that on your own first, because the more you build your own strong foundations, the easier it's going to be in a relationship. The more easier it's going to be to flow in a relationship. And ideally, if your partner did the same thing, boy, the sky's the limit. It's amazing then.
So that'll be a fun thing to talk about, how to build up that foundation, right? Individually and collectively. Yes. After we come back from our commercial break. Indeed. So we'll be back in just a minute.
See you in a minute. And we're back.
We're back. I was muted. I had to unmute.
Yes, we have to make sure we don't intrude on the commercials.
Yes, I know. Since we like to jabber together, because we like talking to each other.
What can I say?
That's why this is called Let's Talk About Dating with Barry and Christine. And today we're talking about why you're scared about getting into a relationship.
Here's why. Actually, and the second part we didn't write in there is, and here's what to do about it.
And what to do about it. Yeah, because we want to talk about sincerely, clearly, the real concerns that people have, because they do.
Yeah.
We're not making light of them, even if they're really not they're not the facts. They're not really based on facts. They still feel very real. Our fears feel very real. And when it comes to our heart, I think it's just exponentially expanded. Don't you think it makes everything bigger, harder, scarier?
Well, I would say for most of us, yes, but some people are so armor-plated around their hearts, they don't even think about it. They've also viewed it or made it subconscious because they don't want to deal with that. So they just live from here up.
Yeah.
And so they're not the ideal partners for a relationship, just to be clear, even though many of them are in relationship.
Yeah.
So it's for those people who really value their hearts and care about their hearts and want to spend time with their hearts where this is so vital. And to speak to a couple of things you said earlier about what things people think about before they even think about relationship. One of which is that fear of repeating what they've done before. Yeah. And to basically drag the baggage from the past relationship is the next one. So the fear factor gets pretty impactful because the fantasy of what could happen is overriding what's available to the person in front of them, available from the person in front of them. So that piece, I said, doing the work between relationship is a place to do the work. So one of the things that I want to talk about, at least to plant the seed, is if you come out of a relationship where you come out with, well, I was going to say issues, so generic, but you come up feeling like discord or upset or hurt feelings that don't seem to go away, that you're feeling this thing of regret, or maybe you feel that you've been mistreated, or things that happened to you in that relationship that you don't feel worthy, you might feel worried that you're going to start or find another person who's going to do the same against you as it happened before. Now, self-fulfilling prophecy, maybe, but the programming you put in, which is the autopilot, so to speak, of your choices, may still be running until you look at what happened and change it. So whilst you're single, especially whilst you're single, it's a great time to seek out a counselor, therapist, guide, facilitator, whatever you want to call them, that will help you navigate through whatever is like the damage from the past relationship, the crash damage. So you can actually do the repair work to be back in normal shape, to go into the next relationship clear and clean. So that way you meet somebody without any of that lens filter you were using in the past relationship applying to your new one. So that's one piece I recommend.
Oh, boy. Yes. And yes, and yes, and yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's because I know that you personally and professionally look at profiles like I do. And when I'm looking at women's profiles like men, for my men clients, it's interesting how often they'll say, I don't have baggage and I don't want anybody that has baggage. Well, everybody has baggage. How can they say they have none? We all had things happen to us that have formed us to who we are. Right. And what my personal goal and professional goal is to take those and say, how do I live my best life? Because of them, in spite of them, alongside with them, cleared out some of them. And some of them are just going to be here. And I kind of like them. I've really looked through them and done an evaluation and said, this works for me. I'm going to keep this part. I've tempered them.
Yes.
Yes. Because they weren't serving me very well in the beginning, that I wanted people to like me, even if I didn't like them. That didn't work very well until I acknowledged, oh, this is what I'm doing, and decided that I didn't like that. I like that genuinely people like me, and that if they aren't the right people for me, okay, I'm letting them walk by. I'm not going to try to get their attention just because. It was very exhausting. But until I acknowledged it, I didn't really know I was doing that. So that's part of this, where even the men that I didn't like, I wanted them to like me. It was crazy making. And I didn't understand why I was feeling kind of crazy about it, off center I was, until I had some therapy and they pointed this out. And I was like, well, that just makes sense.
Well, the thing you said, that thing about I don't need baggage, is like, denial doesn't work. Because that's the thing. So many people I've met who either act like or declare fully that I'm fine, no baggage, I'm all good. It's kind of like, but what about that thing over your shoulder? Yeah, because as you said, it's like we all have baggage, and being in relationship, if it hasn't brought stuff with you, you're going to generate more generally most relationships, unless you're very surface, because when you open your heart, other stuff pours out as well as the love. So being willing to face that and to be willing to be okay when your stuff comes out
Yeah.
is really the first step towards healing anyway.
Yeah.
And so being in a relationship can create the friction or the what is the energizing, the energy to actually have stuff come up that you may have hidden before.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of that, because the
I
thing
know.
is, if it happens, I mean, yes, it's great to be in a relationship. Even better to be in a relationship with somebody who's conscious enough of their own stuff and you're conscious of your stuff. So when it comes up, first of all, when you're in a relationship, you don't keep throwing it at the other person. Because one of the pieces that didn't talk about earlier is that when you have arguments and discourse like we talked about earlier, one thing you can do is take ownership of your part. Because some people don't do that. It's like, when you do this, I feel this. Like, no, I'm feeling this because when that happened, it triggered a memory for me of something else.
Yeah.
That's constructive and healing. So those sort of ownership parts of relationship, especially the dark stuff, the dark side of the moon, is a much healthier way to be in a relationship. And when you do that, you can get through stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah, boy. We always talk about that foundation of acknowledging who you are. Who are you really? You know, the charming things, the not so charming things, the things that you like, oh my God, you know,
If only
I'm
they
not
knew.
sure anybody wants to be around this.
Right.
And be really kind to yourself and give grace to yourself. And what I find is people are so funny. They're like, you know, now that I've been more forgiving to myself, I'm not quite so upset with everybody else doing their thing. I wonder how that happened.
Wow. Amazing.
Isn't it funny though? Because it's all them. And then when you go, oh, I guess I was not being honoring of myself. I wasn't being kind to myself. I wasn't being, oh, I'm a human being having a human experience. And of course I'm going to flub up.
That's the whole thing about projection, which is the whole thing in psychology we studied. When we do that, we project on other people things we're not willing to face ourselves.
Yeah.
What you start realizing you should be thanking them because they're showing you stuff you haven't been willing to face yourself. So now you can face it yourself and deal with it. So yeah, absolutely. So it is.
And one of the real things that happens, I found, is, you know, you have the, oh my gosh, I really like this person. And remember that book about I'm okay, you're okay, and then I'm okay, and you're screwed up, and then, oh my gosh, I figured out I'm screwed up too. It was in the 60s or 70s or something. That's truly what happens, that you have the initial spark and, you know, life is good, and you think, oh, I just want to be with this person. And then guaranteed, stuff's going to come up and you go, must be the relationship, must be them. And what I believe is partly it comes up to heal. And that might be a really good subject for us to talk about, is that it's normal, natural, expected. Please expect it. Please honor it. Please get excited. Oh, I'm going to have some shit come up. Yay.
That's a different reframe. That's good to have it that way.
I have put it that way, and my clients are like, what?
Right.
This is something to celebrate.
Well, that's the thing is that what if we do look at things like that as good news?
Yeah.
You know, better out than in, so to speak. You know, it's like, why not dig it up and get it out on the surface? You go, oh, I don't need that anymore. Let me heal that and get rid of it. Rather than carrying it inside invisible. God, it's so healing.
We'll have a healing party of getting your shit out. I think that would be a really
we call it heal that shit.
I love that. I think we should definitely talk about that, because it scares the shit out of people. It really does.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't heal out of the people. It just heals in. It just scares them in them.
Yeah.
Sorry to do that.
And I love it. And it also is some of the reasons that people leave relationships when it really you could have worked through it. You really could have worked through it.
The thing is, when that happens, people choose the shit over the relationship. Rather than stick to what they have, the wounding, than be with the person who loves them enough to help them heal it, which is so backwards. But people do that. So many divorces happen because of that. So many breakups. So many. I mean, I did it when I was younger. I mean, I'm clear. I held on to my wounds rather than go through it with my partner and have a better relationship.
Me too.
Yeah. What if we didn't choose that? What if we said, you know what? I think this relationship is worth me going through this stuff to the other side so I can be free and have this wonderful time with this person. That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
Wow. How good to do this together.
Oh, yeah.
You know, people are like, I think you've lost your mind when I bring this up to them. But then afterwards, they're like, oh, yeah, that was a good idea. I didn't think it was a good idea in the beginning at all, but I think it's a good idea now.
it's not what's presented in current society. I think for people to see that, but we believe, and I think quite a few people do believe now, is that working through stuff together is a gift that brings you closer.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you think that what is so bad, again, the dark side, the hidden stuff, might scare the other person away.
Yeah.
What if you facing that yourself with them by your side is actually the healthiest way to do it, and actually get closer to you? Then what?
Yeah, we're gonna talk a whole thing. We're gonna do a show on that because that is like rich.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, but Cece's saying we need to stop talking again, even though we
got to wrap up. We better started.
I know. Doesn't it feel like it's only been 5 minutes? That's the kind of first dates you want, is the kind that you talk for an hour and it feels like 5 minutes, right?
Absolutely.
That's why it's so fun to talk to you, Barry.
Yes.
So,
likewise.
If you'd like to have a conversation about, it's been scary to think about going out and putting yourself out there in the dating world or, oh my God, getting in a relationship, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that. And you can reach me through my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com, and click on what's holding you back from love. And it'll get you on my calendar, and we can talk through this scary part. Because as we said, the scary part is real. And it doesn't have to control your life. You can really get past it and have a loving, caring relationship. You can also send me an email at christine@theperfectcatch.com. You can read me. You can read about me and see my work on Facebook and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Twitter and YouTube. And Instagram.
Very, at you.
Oh, you can just shout it out because we know I always forget one. Doesn't matter how. I should do them in alphabetical order or something. And tell them how they can reach you, Barry.
Well, the same offer applies. If you want to really have a conversation to see where you are and help you navigate what's ahead, and if you want to work through those fears and stuff about dating or relationship or how you work through the stuff in relationship, definitely we should talk. My website is barryselby.com, and there's a Let's Connect button on the front page, and a bunch of places on the site you can link up. You can talk to me. And I've just opened up my calendar. There's more room right now. So if you want to get a scheduled appointment, you grab a free session to find out what I'm about, how we work together, et cetera, et cetera. That's available to you there. You can email me at barry@barryselby.com. And on social media, most places I'm Barry Selby, which is basically LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, especially youtube.com/Barry Selby, Pinterest, Clubhouse. On Facebook, Barry Selby author is my page you can follow me on, because my personal profile is different from that. And on Instagram, it's the real Barry Selby, which I'm very busy on now, thanks to Clubhouse. Clubhouse, because it ties to Instagram, has a lot more people following me there now. So my following on Instagram has grown. So I've got to keep providing stuff for them. So I'm putting a lot of good content out there as well. So come find me.
I know. I love your Instagrams. I repost them all the time.
Thank you.
Barry gives great advice on his Instagrams. I am a big fan.
Yes. And in person, if you want to get a session too.
Ooh, sure.
Indeed.
So next week, we'll be back with another scintillating subject about dating at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern, and all the times in between. And I'll actually be in Eastern time next week. So it'll be fun to be talking to you from, will it be next week? No, it won't be next week. I'll still be here next week. Never mind. Yes. I'll still be on the West Coast. I'm so confused.
We'll be here at 1 o'clock our time. 4 o'clock
I'll still be at 1 o'clock our time.
Yes.
So we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
See you then. Take care.